A little while ago, I came across a story that was so fitting for Father's Day. It was funny, it was relevant, and I thought that's a good opening for a sermon. So I was speaking with one of my friends and I told him the story and he said, "You can't say that." I thought he's probably a bit conservative. So I went to my elder son and I told him the story and he said, "Dad, you can't say that." So I'm not going to say it. But here we are, Father's Day. My kids tend to take me sometimes a bit seriously. My elder son was speaking to his son, my grandson, and he said, "When you meet Grandpa, just remember two things. You say, 'Grandpa, how are you?' And Grandpa, you've already told us that story." Well, Father's Day. It doesn't have the commercialism of Mother's Day. And so I thought that instead of alienating more than half the congregation, I would speak about the family of God. But what family? Because one of the most dramatic changes in modern day society has been in our understanding of the family. Once we could assume that we knew what we meant when we talked about a family. Two people, a man and a woman who were married, and they lived in a house with their children, in my father's case 12, in my mother's case 6, and with me 1. The husband went to work to support the family, to earn the money, to buy the food, to get the strength, to go to work, to earn the money, and so on. And the wife stayed at home to care for the children, to wash, to iron, to clean, to shop, to cook, to mend, to knit, to sew. The family was not very mobile. You probably lived somewhere near your accommodation, and certainly you lived near the church you went to. And in many instances, the grandparents lived not all that far away, and you could go there for holidays. What we might call the nuclear family. Now, I guess today that kind of family still exists, but there are other kinds of families. They're extended families, or there are families where both work and are married and have kids, or where both work and are married and don't have kids, where both work and are not married, step families, single parent families, house husbands, same-sex families. And so I went to the Gospels to see what I could find out about families. I was speaking with Peter French on Thursday night, and he pointed out that the lectionary reading for today says, Jesus speaking, "If anyone follow me, he must hate his father, his mother, his wife, his children." And I'm thinking, that doesn't seem all that appropriate for a family. And we know very little about the family of Jesus. Something about his birth, something in the story that Anne read to us this morning, his visit to a wedding in Cana, and not much more. We do know that he once said, when the disciples were turning children away, "Let the children come to me, for such is the kingdom of heaven. If you don't receive the kingdom like you receive a little child, you're not fit for the kingdom." So the family of God, if we think of that as partly the church, it should be a place where we find understanding, security, mutual love, and the challenge of the kingdom. Thinking about fathers, I was reminded again of the saying that's attributed to Mark Twain, although I'm not quite sure, because I think when I read it, his father died when he was 11. And this presumably happened when Mark Twain was 14. But it's a good saying, you don't spoil a good story by sticking to the facts. He's reputed to have said, "When I was a boy of 14, my father was so ignorant I could hardly stand to have the old man around. But when I got to 21, I was astonished at how much he'd learned in the last 7 years." Harold Lucock, an American preacher, wrote, "A family should be a harbour from which the ship leaves to sail, and not a dock where it ties up and rots." And I guess the great values of home, love, community, acceptance are things that we all need. So what is it about a child that Jesus commends? Some say it's their innocence, to which I reply, we all know the innocence of children can be a beautiful myth. Since having 2 children, someone wrote, I can understand better the idea of total depravity, and can even look with an open mind on the doctrine of infant damnation. But I think we can say that within the child we see first of all trust. I trusted my dad. He left school when he was 14. He was out of work for 7 years during the Depression, but he was a very wise man. And I was thinking back when I was 9 years of age, we moved to a new church, and at Christmas time there was the Christmas tree in the Sunday school hall. I was given a cricket ball. So I was down the front where the Christmas tree was, and my dad was sitting in the back seat of the hall, and I said, "Here, Dad, catch." I knew he'd catch it, of course he'd catch it. But it was my absolute trust that if I wanted my father to do something, he could do it. I think it's the candidness of children. They say what they think, don't they? When my grandson was 7 years of age, he came home from school and he said to his mother, "God's a good man, isn't he?" And she said, yes. "He makes things." "What do you mean he makes things?" "Well, he makes cars and buildings and..." No. Some people think he made the world, but men and women make things. Oh. I can spell God. G-O-D. G-O-D. Well done, Mitch. What's his second name? So they said, "Ask your grandfather." So to this day, Mitch thinks that God's second name is either Almighty or Sakes. And the other thing is the wonder of children. We were in Lake Maggiore one day, and a little boy was coming home for lunch with his grandma, and he had found a leaf. Now, there was no way known that Grandma was going to get him home in the next 20 minutes, because he sat in the middle of the square and he examined that leaf from every possible direction, and there was absolute wonder on his face. And something about children is their wonder. And Jesus said to the disciples, "Do not hinder the children." And I guess sometimes we can hinder them. I look back with something of a guilty conscience on how often I let, and it was a good thing, but it was a bad thing, how much I let my commitment to the church get in the way of my commitment to my family. Harold Kleinbell, quoting William Glasner, said we have two personality needs: to love and to be loved. To feel one is worthwhile to oneself and to others. Or as he put it, to experience authentic love in a dependable relationship. As I've got older, my theology has become much simpler. My outlook on life has become much simpler. And the family has become so much more important. Probably, 30 years ago, I had a phone call from my son who said, "I'm playing footy tomorrow, would you like to come and watch?" And so off I went to the 12 noon game, got there a bit late, and there was nothing happening, just a lot of people standing around looking worried, and someone who said to me, "I don't like the look of that." I said, "What's the matter?" He said, "Oh, it's your son." I said, No. But it was April Fool's Day. I thought they were having me on. What had happened, they'd bounced the ball in the centre. Anthony had gone to get it, and the ruckman from the other team had hit him across the temple, and he was unconscious for 40 minutes. Apparently he'd gone into a kind of convulsion and then gone dead still, and the trainer said to me, "I thought my worst fears had come true." And so I lay on the floor in the dressing room with him saying, "Who am I? Who am I?" And after 20 minutes he woke up and said, "You're my dad, of course," and then went out to it again. And that day, perhaps it had never before been like that day, I realised how important the family is. Well, as I've tried to simplify my theology, I've come to this conclusion which I borrowed from a Presbyterian minister who borrowed it from a Jesuit priest. The gospel can be summed up in 4 words: you matter and you belong. And I spent 20 years of my life working with people who did not believe either of those things about themselves. Homeless men who weren't counted on the night of the census, so they certainly didn't matter, and who could go for a week or so without anyone calling them by their name because they didn't belong. But if there's one thing that the family of God means, it's this: that as children of God, we do matter and we do belong. Amen.